That information came direct from Meghan's ex-husband, Trevor Engelson, via an intermediary. And obviously Trevor Engelson...
For over a decade, Meghan Markle built her public image on a carefully crafted story. She was the woman who defied the odds, who rose from cable television actress to duchess, who fought against the establishment and claimed her voice after years of supposed silencing. She was the star who told the world she had found her prince, that her happily ever after was hard-won and deserved. But what happens when a ghost from the past, a man she desperately hoped would remain silent forever, finally begins to speak? What happens when the person who knew her long before Harry, long before Oprah, long before Netflix and Spotify, begins to lift the veil on the Meghan Markle fairy tale? That ghost has a name: Trevor Engelson, Meghan's ex-husband. A man who stayed quiet for 10 long years. A man who said nothing as she reinvented herself for the cameras. A man who carried the secrets of their marriage while she erased him from her story. And now, reports suggest that silence is finally over. And what Trevor has to say, if true, is more explosive than any tabloid rumor, more damaging than any comedy sketch, and far more dangerous to Meghan's image than anything her estranged father or outspoken half-sister could ever reveal. Because Trevor lived with her. He loved her. He married her. And when he finally broke his silence, the picture he painted wasn't of a silenced duchess. It was of a calculating, controlling woman who placed image above intimacy, ambition above love, and who discarded people as easily as she discarded her first wedding ring. So let's unravel the story together, because this is not just another royal headline. This is the story Meghan hoped you would never hear. To understand why Trevor Engelson's words matter, you have to go back before the tiaras, before the castles, before the Montecito mansion. In 2004, Meghan Markle was not a household name. She was a struggling actress, hustling for roles in Hollywood, attending auditions, working bit parts, and hoping to make it big. She had charm, she had ambition, but she hadn't yet found her big break. And in that uncertain world, Trevor Engelson appeared. He was a Hollywood producer, not the most famous man in the room, but someone with connections, someone who believed in her talent. They met, they dated, they fell into the rhythms of a long-term relationship. 7 years of dating is not casual. 7 years is endurance, commitment, a shared history that becomes woven into daily life. Trevor wasn't just a boyfriend. He was the man who supported Meghan when no one else believed she'd ever be more than a pretty face in a forgettable role. He stood by her when scripts dried up, when doors closed, when casting directors said no. He was the constant in her world of rejection and uncertainty. By 2011, Meghan finally landed her breakout role on Suits, a cable show about lawyers in New York. She played Rachel Zane, and suddenly she had a steady paycheck, a fan base, and the beginning of recognition. And in that same year, she and Trevor decided to marry. Their wedding wasn't the royal spectacle that would come later. It wasn't a global event. It was a relaxed, sun-soaked ceremony in Jamaica, surrounded by friends and family, filled with laughter, casual joy, and the hope of a future together. There was no palace, no crown, no cameras, just Meghan and Trevor promising forever in front of people who genuinely believed in their love story. But forever, as it turned out, was fleeting. 2 years later, Meghan abruptly filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Trevor, blindsided, said nothing. No interviews, no bitter exposés. He didn't run to the tabloids to cash in on her rising fame. He simply faded into the background while Meghan's star continued to rise. She moved on. She scrubbed Trevor from her narrative. In interviews, in documentaries, in her carefully orchestrated Oprah sit-down, Trevor's name was never uttered. He was the invisible man, erased as if he had never existed. And for years, he played along, remaining silent, living his life, remarrying, starting a family, and refusing to break the vow of discretion. until now. Why now? Why after all this time? That's the question that has everyone talking. For 10 years, Trevor Engelson was the one person who could have rewritten Meghan's carefully polished image. He could have cashed in during the height of her fame, when she was the most Googled woman in the world. He could have written a tell-all book, sold interviews, or at the very least whispered to the tabloids. But he didn't. And that silence gave Meghan power. She counted on it. Because as long as Trevor stayed quiet, she controlled the narrative. She was the one who told the world she had been silenced. She was the one who described herself as the victim. She was the one who painted the palace as the enemy. But when Trevor speaks, the illusion shatters. Because unlike distant relatives with axes to grind, unlike outspoken critics with little personal knowledge, Trevor has credibility. He was there. He lived with her. He saw her off camera. And when he allegedly revealed what life with Meghan was really like, it exposed a very different woman than the Duchess who lectures the world on compassion and humility. According to reports, Trevor described a marriage that looked perfect on the outside but was suffocating behind closed doors. He allegedly painted Meghan not as a humble partner, but as a perfectionist obsessed with control, appearances, and getting her own way. One moment in particular has been whispered about, an incident in their home that left Trevor shaken. No violence, no shouting match that ended in broken glass, but something more chilling. A glimpse into Meghan's relentless need to dominate her environment, to micromanage every detail, to prioritize image over intimacy. He described it as the moment the mask slipped, when the woman he thought he married revealed herself to be someone else entirely. For Trevor, it was a turning point. For Meghan, it was a truth she thought would never escape those walls. Because she banked on his silence. She believed Trevor would never tell. And for 10 years, she was right. But now, those private moments are no longer safe. Imagine what that means for Meghan today. This isn't Piers Morgan firing off insults on television. This isn't her half-sister Samantha Markle writing another bitter tell-all. This isn't even Thomas Markle airing his heartbreak to the press. This is Trevor Engelson, the man Meghan married, the man she left behind, the man she erased from her story. His words cut deeper because they can't be dismissed as irrelevant. They can't be spun away as lies. They are lived experience. And that is what Meghan fears most. Because Trevor's story doesn't exist in isolation. It fits a pattern of broken relationships, discarded people, and a trail of individuals who say Meghan uses and discards when they no longer serve her ambitions. Trevor was the first, the one who supported her before she had fame, before she had fortune, before she had Harry. And when she was done, she left. No explanations that satisfied him. No attempts at reconciliation. Just a divorce filing and silence. So, how did Meghan react when whispers of Trevor's revelations began to surface? Reports out of Montecito suggest fury. Not annoyance, not irritation, but fury. Because this is the one voice she can't silence. She can sue tabloids, she can cut off relatives, she can spin Oprah specials and Netflix series. But Trevor, he's untouchable. He's not bitter. He's not looking for money. He has his own life, his own family, his own career. That makes him dangerous. Because when he speaks, people listen. When he describes Meghan behind closed doors, it carries more weight than any critic, any commentator, any ex-friend. It comes from the one man who shared her bed, her home, her dreams. The one man who knows the Meghan before the Duchess costume was stitched together. And Meghan knows it. She knows that if Trevor truly decided to tell his story in full, it could undo years of image building. Years of carefully scripted interviews, staged photo shoots, and speeches about compassion and kindness could crumble under the weight of one man's truth. And here's where the story takes on even more suspense. Trevor has not gone public in a sensational way. He hasn't sold a tell-all book or gone on national television. The whispers of his revelations came through an intermediary, a leak, a conversation that slipped into the public domain. Which begs the question, is Trevor testing the waters? Is he dipping a toe into the pool of public revelation, seeing how Meghan reacts, seeing how the media responds? Or is this just the beginning, a spark before the blaze? Because if Trevor were to sit down tomorrow and give a full interview, if he were to confirm the details of their marriage, the control, the obsession with appearances, the coldness that replaced intimacy, Meghan's brand could collapse overnight. Imagine the impact. Netflix executives rethinking deals, corporate sponsors reconsidering partnerships, public opinion turning not just skeptical but hostile. Because once the illusion breaks, once people see Meghan not as a victim but as a manipulator, the house of cards falls. Trevor's credibility is his weapon. For a decade, he said nothing. He could have made millions telling his story. He didn't. He could have fueled tabloids with juicy quotes. He didn't. He could have capitalized on Meghan's rise. He didn't. That restraint makes his words now even more powerful, because he doesn't look opportunistic. He looks honest. He looks like a man who stayed quiet until he couldn't anymore. And that is why Meghan trembles. Not because of what Samantha says, not because of what Thomas says, not even because of what British tabloids scream in headlines. She trembles because Trevor holds the one version of her story that she cannot rewrite. The version of Meghan before Harry. The version of Meghan before royal fame. The version of Meghan stripped of the Duchess persona, the Netflix cameras, and the carefully curated speeches. The raw, unfiltered Meghan behind closed doors. And that version, according to Trevor, is not the saintly humanitarian she sells to, the world. It is a woman consumed with ambition, obsessed with control, and willing to discard anyone who doesn't fit into her vision of success. So the question now is simple, but terrifying for Meghan. What will Trevor do next? Will he step fully into the spotlight and tell all? Or will he retreat back into silence, leaving Meghan shaken but not shattered? Either way, the damage is done. The whisper is out there. The silence has cracked. The ghost she erased has returned, and his shadow looms larger than any critic she has ever faced. For Meghan, this isn't just another scandal. It's an existential threat to her brand. Because when the one man you thought would never speak begins to talk, the world listens. And when the world listens, the fairy tale cracks. So, buckle up, because this story is just beginning. The Meghan Markle narrative has always been carefully controlled, but with Trevor Engelson stepping out of the shadows, that control is slipping. And once it's gone, no amount of royal titles, PR spin, or media manipulation can get it back. For years now, Meghan Markle has presented herself to the world as the eternal victim, the Duchess who suffered in silence, the woman who told us she was never truly heard, never truly understood, never truly embraced. We've heard the story so many times that it has almost become a mantra. The outsider silenced by the establishment, the biracial actress dismissed by the British press, the loving wife persecuted by cruel tabloids. But when her ex-husband, Trevor Engelson, finally breaks a silence that has lasted more than a decade, something far more devastating comes into focus. Because Trevor's revelations don't exist in a vacuum. They don't stand alone. They validate the whispers that have circulated for years, the quiet conversations in Hollywood, the murmurs from former friends, the subtle warnings from colleagues. Trevor's words confirm what many long suspected. Meghan Markle's story is not one of betrayal against her. It is a story of betrayal carried out by her. The Duchess who insists she was silenced may in fact be the one silencing others, erasing their voices, discarding them the moment they no longer serve her, and climbing over their broken loyalty to reach the next rung of ambition. And here's the chilling part. Once Trevor spoke, once that silence cracked, everything Meghan had spent years building suddenly looked fragile. almost paper thin. Because Trevor isn't a gossip columnist. He isn't a disgruntled family member cashing in on resentment. He isn't even a palace insider with a political motive. He is something far more dangerous. He is the man who married her. He is the man who loved her long before the cameras, long before the palaces, long before Netflix contracts and Spotify podcasts. He is the man who lived behind the curtain with Meghan Markle, who saw her unfiltered, who knows the truth of who she was before she reinvented herself into a global brand. And when he speaks, the world listens differently, because unlike Meghan's carefully staged confessions, his don't sound like strategy. They sound like truth. Even longtime friends, people who will never go on record but who whisper quietly, in Hollywood circles have said the same thing for years. Meghan uses people until they're no longer useful. She attaches herself when it serves her, and when the benefit fades, she cuts ties. Coldly, cleanly, ruthlessly. Trevor's revelations are not shocking to them. They are vindicating. They are proof that the pattern was there from the beginning. That what the world sees now on the royal stage is not an invention of recent years, but the continuation of a behavior that started long before Harry. And that is why his voice is so dangerous to her. Because his words don't just open old wounds, they destroy her narrative. Think of the irony. Meghan has spent years telling the world that the monarchy silenced her, that she was trapped, voiceless, desperate to be heard. But in reality, Trevor's silence was the silence she benefited from most. For 10 long years, he held his tongue. For 10 long years, he let her erase him from her life story. For 10 long years, he protected her simply by not speaking. And now, that silence is broken. And once the first crack appears, the whole facade begins to tremble. Because if Trevor is speaking today, who might speak tomorrow? Which other figures from her past, emboldened by the fact that her most intimate former partner has stepped into the light, might find their own voices too? But let's step back to the beginning, because the context is everything. Meghan Markle met Trevor Engelson long before the world knew her name. She was a struggling actress in Los Angeles, auditioning for bit parts, hoping for a break, fighting rejection after rejection in a city where dreams go to die. She wasn't yet Rachel Zane, the paralegal from Suits. She wasn't yet the Duchess with her own royal crest. She was a working actress, just another face in the crowd. And Trevor? He was a Hollywood producer, modestly successful, with connections that mattered. He wasn't Spielberg, he wasn't Scorsese, but he knew the business. And more importantly, he believed in her. He believed when others didn't. He supported her through the grind of auditions, the letdowns, the waiting tables in between acting, jobs. For 7 years, they built a life together. The kind of stability that matters when nothing else is certain. 7 years is no fling. 7 years is family. And after those 7 years, in 2011, they married in Jamaica in a ceremony that couldn't have been more different from what the world would see 7 years later with Harry. There were no tiaras, no palaces, no horse-drawn carriages. There was sun, sand, laughter, friends, a relaxed island atmosphere. People said it was joyous, carefree, a reflection of two people who had grown together and wanted forever. But forever didn't last. Because just 2 years later, Meghan filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. No public drama, no long speeches, just papers served and a husband blindsided. Here is where timing matters. In 2013, when Meghan filed those papers, her life was changing. Suits was finally giving her visibility. Her role was expanding. Her career was on the rise. And what did she do the moment that happened? She ended the marriage. After nearly a decade with Trevor, she walked away just as opportunity knocked. That wasn't coincidence. That was calculation. To Hollywood insiders, the message was clear. Trevor had helped her survive the years of struggle, but now he was expendable. The timing was too perfect to ignore. For Trevor, it wasn't just heartbreak. It was a brutal lesson in where he stood in her list of priorities. Career first, image first, Meghan first. And if you step back and look at her life since then, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Relationships that no longer serve her ambitions are ended. Friends who don't fit the narrative are cut off. Family who complicate the brand are discarded or silenced. It is a cycle. Trevor was simply the first major casualty, but he was also the one person who stayed quiet. And in that quiet, Meghan thrived. She told her version of the story without contradiction. She painted herself as the abandoned one, the misunderstood one, the woman who always gave but was never appreciated. The world believed it because the one man who could dispute it said nothing. Until now. Now let's pause here, because this is where the suspense really builds. Why did Trevor stay silent all these years? He could have made millions telling his story. He could have written a book, done interviews, fueled the tabloids. He could have spoken in 2018 when Meghan was on top of the world, marrying into royalty, adored by millions. He could have spoken in 2020 when the Oprah interview exploded across the globe. But he didn't. And that restraint gave him credibility. It made him look like the bigger person, the one who had moved on. And maybe he truly had. He remarried, he started a family, he built his own life. For a while, it seemed like he would stay in the shadows forever. But once that first revelation slipped into the public domain, everything changed. Because once a man like Trevor speaks after so long, people lean in closer. They listen differently, and Meghan knows it. Imagine being Meghan in Montecito, watching this play out. She has built an empire on her victimhood. She has told and retold her story until it hardened into brand identity. She has survived scandal after scandal by doubling down on the same message. I am the silenced woman, the misunderstood duchess, the victim of cruelty. But Trevor flips that script on its head. He doesn't show her as silenced. He shows her as the silencer. He shows her as the one who pulled strings, who controlled the story, who cut people off the moment they stopped being useful. And suddenly, the entire house of cards shakes. Because when the man who was married to her contradicts her, who do you believe? The duchess who has made a career out of constant complaints, or the ex-husband who stayed silent for 10 years and only now begins to speak? And here's the final twist of the knife. Timing. Meghan isn't at her peak anymore. The glow of the wedding has faded. The sympathy has worn thin. The deals with streaming giants and corporations aren't what they used to be. Public opinion has shifted. The brand has cracks. So Trevor's revelations land not on the marble floor of invincible fame, but on the cracked glass of a faltering empire. In 2018, Meghan could have brushed him off as jealous. In 2020, she could have drowned him out with Oprah's primetime stage. But in 2025, when her image is wobbling, when the world has grown skeptical, his words hit like a hammer. They don't just echo. They shatter. And so here we are. 10 years of silence shattered in a moment. Trevor Engelson, the man Meghan Markle thought would stay in the shadows forever, has spoken. And with just a handful of revelations, he has managed to do what the tabloids, the palace, and even her estranged family never could. He has cut through the heart of Meghan's carefully manufactured image. And it is devastating. Because he isn't an outsider. He isn't a commentator with an agenda. He is the man who knew her best before the world did. He is the one voice Meghan cannot dismiss. And now the question hangs over everything. Who is the real Meghan Markle? Is she the silenced victim EDUG has always claimed to be? Or is she the manipulator Trevor's revelations suggest? A woman who discards people, rewrites history, and controls the narrative at any cost. And here's where you come in. Because this isn't just Trevor versus Meghan. This is bigger. This is the battle for the truth of a brand, the collapse of an image, the unraveling of a carefully spun narrative. So, tell me, who do you believe? Do you believe the ex-husband who stayed quiet for a decade? Or do you believe the Duchess who has turned complaint into a global industry? Because make no mistake, Trevor's voice is only the beginning. Once the silence is broken, there is no putting the genie back in the bottle. Others will follow. The story will spread. And the reckoning Meghan Markle has avoided for so long may finally be here. This is Crown and Controversy, unraveling the royals one scandal at a time. Don't forget to subscribe.